Hello, class. Welcome. I had some technical difficulties over the last few weeks with some of my devices, my software, my laptops, really my iPad. So it's been difficult to record some of the class sessions. However, here I am. Here's a recording. Thank you again for turning in your assignments. Once again, I'm going to say this. I know I emailed it to you, but I'll say this to you guys again. If you don't like the grade on your assignment and you'd like to redo it, you'd like to have a meeting with me to talk, I'm more than happy to help you redo the assignments. To walk you through it, you can redo them. You can turn them in for a better grade. We can talk it through. And because remember, each of those assignments are all going to combine to create your research design. So when you're getting ready to turn in the research design, you really want to make sure all those pieces, the problem statement, data methodology, paper, your lit reviews, all that stuff is on point. It looks great for the research design. If you have any questions or comments or anything that you need help with in regards to the class, feel free to send me an email. We can visit over the phone and we can discuss some of the what's going on. So yeah, let's talk. I put up a PowerPoint presentation during week 4 for the class. So let's just go over it just briefly, and then we'll talk some more about, we're going over uniform crime reports, and we'll talk about sampling in a minute. So, okay, so the uniform crime reports. So the uniform crime report is basically an annual report on crime in the United States published annually by the FBI. It's used as a point of comparison for other data gathering procedures, particularly victim surveys, and self-reports. So the FBI receives the data from local police departments all across the U.S. and they gather it in the Uniform Crime Report. So the UCR is divided up into two parts. Index. Part one is index crimes. Part two is non-index crimes. So index crimes are crimes which are more serious in nature. And so they have that there. It's occurring frequently. There's a frequency in it. It's more likely to be reported. Non-index crimes are crimes like gambling, simple assault, vandalism, and those are kind of lower level crimes within the UCR. So if you go down, I talked about some of the crime rate. We discussed crime rate as well in the PowerPoint presentation. So when you're looking at crime rate and you're studying those sorts of things, depending on where you're doing, I know some of you guys may be doing research studies focused on cities, some on states, some on national levels. If you're focusing on certain populations, crime's normally measured with every 100,000 people. So like, let's say I'm living in a small town with only 200 people, but we had 20 murders that year. That's a serious problem versus, someone who's living in New York City. They're doing research in New York City and you have millions of people living in New York City and they only had 20 murders over there. Well, 20 murders in New York City is nowhere near as bad as 20 murders in a small town in, let's say, Texas or Nebraska or Oklahoma that only has 200 people. So when you're doing research on crime, you have to look at the population size to get an accurate measurement, because 20 murders or 20 vandalisms or 20 or in one town may be more serious than the same amount of crime occurring in a larger city with a larger population. And so that's how really crime's really measured, frequency, those sorts of things. You may have 10 instances of vandalism in New York. Now, we know that's not true because it's New York, but you may have 10 instances of vandalism in New York, and you have millions of people living there. Well, the NYPD will be so pleased if it's only 10. But let's say that you're passing through a small town in Texas and they only have populations of 300 people. 10 incidents of vandalism throughout the year, on average over 5 years, may be a lot for them. And that may be a serious problem for them. So when you're doing research, you have to keep population in mind. So now let's talk about the National Incident-Based Reporting System, or the NIBRS. It's the unit record reporting system used in the redesigned UCR in which each local law enforcement agency reports on each individual arrest. So the UCR was updated a few years back, and so they came up with a national incident-based reporting system. And there are some differences in it. Whereas UCR collects data for 8 Part 1 offenses, which are, remember, those are index crimes, more serious crimes. So they collect like data for 8 Part 1 offenses. So that's like murder, rape, aggravated assault, robbery, burglary, larceny, motor vehicle theft, arson. Those are the UCR will collect that. But when they updated it and they have the NIBRS, it collects data for 23 different categories. So it's more specific in serious crimes. So there's some differences between the NIBRS versus the UCR. The NIBRS is incident based, whereas UCR is more summary reporting. You have expanded offense reporting, new offense definitions, elimination of the hierarchy rule in the NIBRS, greater specificity of data, crimes against society, attempted versus completed crimes. So NIBRS looks at attempted crimes, not just completed crimes. And then designation of computer crimes, and then better statistical analysis. So these are really good sources of data for criminologists, criminal justice professionals when they're doing research. If you're conducting research right now, and in your research design, you decide to use a quantitative study and you're trying to look for data source, this is a very useful data source for you. Many of you guys in your jobs within law enforcement or community development, those sorts of things, you may look at this to as a data source for collecting data, those sorts of things. Okay, so now let's move on to sampling. So types of sampling you have. So with sampling, here's the thing, guys. When you're conducting research in a large city, let's say you have 1 million people, and you want to find out if people in a particular, let's like the community, and let's say that there are 10,000 residents living in a community, and you want to do an interview to find out qualitative study, and you're trying to do an interview to find out if people feel safe in their community. It may be very difficult for you to interview 10,000 people. So you're going to have to get a sample size. So there are different types of sampling. So you have 2 types, probability and non-probability. You have simple random, stratified random, cluster, and systematic in probability. In non-probability, you have quota, accidental, purposive, and snowball. So probability samples refer to samples that permit estimation of the likelihood of each element of the population being selected in the sample. Then you have simple random samples, which are samples in which each element of the population or universe has an equal probability of being selected. So these are really ways in which you can select your sample size. So you have that community as 10,000 residents. Well, how are you going to pick, let's say you need to interview, you're going to interview 20 people. How would you gather that sample size? Well, you may want a diverse sample size because, you want to make sure that your data is as valid as possible. Let's say that you're in a community with 10,000 residents, and let's say 60% of it's African American, 30% Hispanic, Latinx, and then 10% Caucasian. Well, you may not necessarily want to get a sample size of completely African Americans, because all the African Americans in that community may have a stronger feeling of safety than, let's say, maybe your Latin, the Latin population or the white population. So you definitely want to, or even with you may not, or even with gender, you don't necessarily want to just have only females within your sample size, because some of the females may all feel as though they aren't as safe in the community because they're females. So you really want a diverse sample size if you're when you're creating that. So types of sampling, we talked about that. Please look it over, read over in your book. become more specific with it. Depending on what your research study is, if you're doing this, then you're actually going to you're going to take a look at your sample sizes. You're going to take a look at those sorts of things and see if and how you can gather that sample size. So please make sure you mention that within your research design. Again, if you have any questions or comments or anything like that, feel free to email me, class. Um, and I'll be posting another video for the lectures. And I'll reiterate this again, guys. Your research design, you're not retyping everything. All the assignments that you did should come together for the research design, and you're making your edits, your changes, and things like that based on the comments I made on some of the assignments. Some of you guys, I didn't have any comments. It looked really good. Keep it up. Also, remember, there's an outline for the research design in your syllabus under the assignment heading, so please follow that as well. Um, no discussion board for, let me just confirm from as memory serves, no discussion board for um, December 23rd or the week of December 23rd or December 30th because it's Christmas and New Year's. So please remember and keep that in mind. But if you need to contact me at any point in time over the break, feel free to email me. We can visit over the phone. I'm here for you guys. Any help that you need. Take care.